Hi, Thriller Movies Recap here. I'm going to show you an American horror thriller movie titled Get Out. So relax and enjoy. A young black man named Andre is strolling by himself across a well-kept suburban street at night. A small sports car approaches and begins to follow him gently. After becoming startled, Andre utters the phrase "fuck this shit" and abruptly reverses course, walking swiftly back in the opposite direction. The vehicle is still parked where it was when he turns to check what the vehicle did. But the door is open. Andre is suddenly attacked by a man wearing a medieval helmet, knocks him out, and carries his body to the vehicle. Rose brings coffee and cakes to her photographer lover Chris's flat. He worries that they are unaware that she is dating a black man as they prepare to visit her family members for the weekend. She reassures him that despite the likelihood that they would say some foolish things, they are quite progressive. If he had the option, her father would have cast a third vote for Obama. She admits that Chris is the only black man she has ever dated, but she is sure that her parents will be accommodating. Chris asks for a cigarette on the way to her parents' house, but Rose takes it and throws it out the window, telling Chris that her parents would be furious that she is dating a smoker. Rod, a TSA employee at the nearby airport, receives a call from Chris reminding him to take care of his dog and refrain from feeding him people food. Chris is chastised by Rod for dating a white woman and told that going to visit the white people is a terrible idea. Chris becomes a little envious when he flirts a little with Rose, but Rose finds it cute. A deer darts out in front of the vehicle and is hit while they are talking loudly and not totally paying attention to the road. When they call the police and stop to investigate, they are questioned about their whereabouts by the officers. Rose explains to them that they are visiting her close family. Rose intervenes and argues that since Chris wasn't driving, the officer doesn't need to see his identification. Chris comments to Rose that it was admirable of her to stand up for him against the racist policeman before the officer releases them. Rose's parents' house is visited by Chris and Rose. Dean Armitage, her amiable neurosurgeon father, admits to Chris that he would have cast a third vote for Obama if he had the option. Missy, her mother, practices hypnosis in a curiously icy manner. She offers to use hypnosis to help Chris break his nicotine addiction, but Chris feels uncomfortable with her meddling in his thoughts. The Armitage had two black employees working for them, housekeeper Georgina and groundskeeper Walter. They were hired to care for his parents, and Dean would have felt horrible firing them. Dean admits that it looks bad for two wealthy white people to have two black workers. There is undoubtedly something strange about Walter and Georgina. They definitely exude a rigid, false Stepford civility. Additionally, they both talk in an antiquated dialect. Dean gives Chris a tour of the house and shows him old family photos. Dean claims that his father was a track runner who was beat out by Jesse Owens to compete in the 1936 Olympics in front of Hitler. And while that was sad for his dad, it was still great to have Hitler's Aryan idealism proven wrong. There are also photos of Rose's brother who will be joining them later. He's a surgeon like his dad, but he went through a rough patch. In the afternoon, the family gathers for tea. Missy stirs her tea and makes 3 light taps with her spoon against the teacup. This will be crucial later. About Chris's parents, Missy inquires. Chris alleges that his mother passed away after being struck by a car when he was 11 and that his father abandoned the family when he was a small child. While pouring tea, Georgina sort of short-circuits, and Missy advises her to go lie down and recover. Rose is informed by the Armitage that their huge party will take place tomorrow. She is taken aback, and they reassure her that the date is the same each year. Jeremy, Rose's brother, shows up. He is a violent, spoiled privileged child. At dinner that night, drunk Jeremy begins to discuss MMA combat with Chris, claiming that given his heritage as a warrior, Chris would be a natural at it. Chris refuses to let him spar since he has rules against play fighting with inebriated people. Maybe it's time for Jeremy to go to bed, say Dean and Missy. Rose apologizes for her family before Chris and Rose retreat to their room and fall asleep. Chris decides to sneak outside for a cigarette in the middle of the night after getting up. He is outside when he notices something approaching him from a distance. Walter's here. He approaches Chris directly, then abruptly turns around and flees in a different direction. Georgina is gazing out a window within the home. She is, in fact, gazing at her own reflection and not Chris. Chris chooses to go back inside as she adjusts her hair. Chris is startled by Missy putting on a light before he can return to his room. She reiterates her offer to help him stop smoking and argues that it is a horrible habit. She uses her teaspoon as a focus item while she slowly hypnotizes him while he sits there mocking the idea of hypnotism. She takes him back to the night his mother passed away when he was 11 years old, and he recalls that he was too terrified to do anything like call the police that would make it real. So he just sat in front of the TV while frantically pounding his bedposts. Chris is currently engaging in the same behavior by pressing his nails into the chair's arms. She commands him to sink, tapping her teacup 3 times with her spoon while Chris in the present slips into darkness and sees himself and Missy far above. Chris in the past sinks into his bed at the age of 11. His body, paralyzed in the chair, is no longer cognizant. He checks his phone as soon as he gets out of bed. Chris received a photo of Rod acting like he was giving his dog booze. He plugs it in since his battery is low. Chris says to Rose that he believes her mother hypnotized him the night before. He only has hazy memories of the event. Rich friends of the Armitage show up for the big event. The majority of elderly white people who make improper comments to Chris include things like, "He is a good build. Black guys are better in bed. And because Tiger Woods plays golf, he must have a good swing." Chris leaves the gathering undetected and meets Jim Hudson, Stephen Root, a blind man who claims that everyone there is illiterate. Chris is perfectly aware of his identity and that he is an art dealer. Jim claims to appreciate Chris's creative output. He acknowledges the irony of a blind art dealer but informs him that he has an excellent assistant who excels at describing artwork. He wishes he had Chris's eye. Jim claims that he attempted photography himself but was never very successful. Chris finds another black man as he returns to mingling with the visitors. He is around Chris's age, and Chris tries to connect with him, but just like Walter and Georgina, he is rigid and unnatural. Chris, though, notices a familiarity in him. Note: those with keen eyes will recognize Andre from the opening scene. When Chris decides to contact Rod once more, he discovers that his phone is once more disconnected. He connects it, makes contact with Rod, and informs him of the situation. Rod cautions him to leave the area since white people enjoy having sex slaves. Chris tells Rose how strange everything is and that his phone was unplugged once more when she sees him. She explains to him that his paranoia is simply a result of his difficult circumstances. She departs when he accepts. Chris is instructed by Rod to snap a photo of the black man so that he may check his memory. Georgina blocks Chris from leaving and apologizes for unplugging his cell phone. She lifted it up when dusting the nightstand and didn't want to fiddle with it anymore once it came unplugged. He claims that everything is okay and that he didn't intend to expose her. She is unable to comprehend. He then makes it clear that he didn't intend to put her in danger. When she tells him that the Armitage treat her like family, she gets really strange and sheds a single tear. Chris returns to the outside and uses his cell phone to try to sneakily take a picture of the recognizable black man, but he has neglected to turn off the flash. The moment the phone flashes, the man adjusts. He transitions from being too proper to ranting. He yells at Chris to get out, as his nose begins to bleed. "Get the heck out while you still can." Rose is now also terrified. She asks her father what occurred, and he replies that the man had a seizure as a result of the flash. The man emerges, apologizes for upsetting everyone, and states that he needs to go home. Chris informs Rose as they go out for a stroll that he is positive he recognized the man and that something odd is unquestionably happening. She concurs, stating that it did not appear to be having a seizure at all. Chris claims he would like to leave right away and go home. Rose agrees grudgingly. She promises to invent a story to tell her parents. Dean is hosting a silent auction with his visitors back at the mansion, and they are using bingo cards to place bids. A picture of Chris is placed next to him. The auction is won by Jim Hudson. All of the other visitors leave. As Chris begins to pack his possessions, Rod calls him to inform him that the man in the image is a man they know by the name of Dre who used to work at a theater but recently vanished. The phone's battery runs out. Chris observes the open closet door. When he looks inside, he discovers a box containing pictures of Rose kissing numerous other black men. Additionally, there are pictures of her with Walter and Georgina, neither of whom resembles the artificial versions Chris has encountered. Chris turns out to not be Rose's first encounter with a black man. Chris informs Rose that he wants the keys to load their stuff into the car when she comes back. They leave the house, and she searches her purse for them. Jeremy arrives out of nowhere, blocking the entrance. Missy and Dean are also present. When Missy and Dean tell Jeremy to calm down, Jeremy is about to launch an assault. Rose keeps hearing from Chris to grab the keys. Chris is informed by Missy and Dean that they do not want him to leave. Rose replies calmly to Chris's repeated requests for the keys, "You know I can give you the keys." Chris finally understands Rose is also involved in whatever this is. Chris is beaten by Jeremy. Chris falls back into the gloomy emptiness once more as a result of Dean screaming and Missy banging her glass with a teaspoon. Rod tries to call Chris repeatedly, but the call always goes to voicemail. He goes to the police after researching the man in the photo and discovering that he has been missing for some time. He claims, in front of a female officer, that his son was abducted by white people to serve as a sex slave, just like the man missing in the photo. To hear Rod's account, she summons 2 additional police officers. They all start giggling after he's done. He won't be taken seriously by anyone. When Chris awakens, he is restrained to a chair in front of an antique TV and a mounted deer head. He views a video that Dean's father created in which he discusses immortality and other topics. Chris notices that the padding on the chair arm has been exposed after his fingernails tore through the leather. On the screen once more are the teacup and spoon. He exits with a ting-ting-ting. When Rod calls Chris again, Rose picks up. She tells a fib when she claims that Chris left 2 days ago and that she is also worried about his whereabouts. She says he fled in an Uber or perhaps a taxi. She expresses alarm when Rod informs her he went to the cops. She tells him she knows he has feelings for her when he picks up on the fact that something is off and tries to capture the conversation. He calls her a crazy bitch and ends the call. Jim Hudson is visible when Chris first awakens. He informs Chris that they will trade minds. Jim could care less about the other partygoers' obsession with becoming black. Instead, he would much rather be able to see the world through Chris's perspective. All of this is made possible by Dean's improved neurosurgery. In order to prepare the body donors for the procedure, Missy hypnotizes them. He will continue to exist in the gloomy vacuum and be able to travel further as a sort of passenger, as they had previously witnessed at the party. The flashing is an unwelcome side effect. Chris is once more gone with the ting-ting-ting of the teaspoon. Jim Hudson is prepared for a brain transplant by Dean and Jeremy. Dean instructs Jeremy to find Chris. As we can clearly see, they were in the home's basement when Jeremy entered the room and discovered Chris unconscious. He removes his cuffs and prepares for. Chris had placed chair padding over his ears to muffle the sound of the teaspoon, so he wasn't really unconscious after all. He eliminates Jeremy. In order to find Jeremy, Dean makes a call and leaves the lab area. Chris charges at him and stabs him with the antlers from the animal in the adjacent room. He topples a candle, setting it ablaze and setting Jim Hudson's blanket on fire as well. Rose is unaware of anything because she has her headphones in. She is searching for pictures of muscular, attractive black men while listening to music. Chris locates Missy after going upstairs. Chris outruns her and shatters the teacup as she reaches for the spoon and cup. Instead, she uses a knife to assault him. However, he turns the knife against her, killing her instantly. Chris tries to enter the house through the front entrance once more, but Jeremy is there and chokes him. Chris tries to pull open the front door twice, but Jeremy shuts it both times. On the third attempt, Chris stabs Jeremy in the thigh and brutally head stomps him, breaking his skull as he kicks the door. He dashes outside and enters Jeremy's vehicle. The earlier medieval helmet is now on the front passenger seat. Georgina is hit as he begins to drive down the driveway. He cannot simply leave her to suffocate like he did to his mother, so he puts her in a car and drives off down the driveway. When she awakens, she attacks him. Her wig falls off during the operation, and we can see that she also has a scar across her head from a brain transplant. She perishes when they collide with a tree. Through her headphones, Rose hears this. The rearview mirror is abruptly destroyed. Chris is being pursued by Rose, who has a gun. She sees Georgina and calls her grandma, despite his pleadings for her to desist. Chris is not hit by Rose's second shot. Rose calls out, "Get him, Grandpa," as he tackles Chris as Walter unexpectedly sprints by her in pursuit of Chris. Chris snaps a photo of the wrestler as they struggle on the ground. Walter turns around and requests Rose's weapon. He asks for it, shoots her in the stomach, then turns the gun on himself. Rose is bleeding to death on the ground. Chris bats away her attempt to grab the gun. Rose places a hand on Chris's cheek and tells him she loves him as he stoops over her. Chris begins to choke Rose but pauses since he can't finish it. A police car approaches. Rose makes a faint appeal for assistance knowing that Chris would be arrested by the local police. However, Rod is the one getting out of the police car. Chris enters the vehicle. Rod remarks, "Man, I told you not to go in that house," as he surveys the mayhem. Rod responds that he works for the TSA and assures Chris that everything will be fine when Chris inquires about how he located him. As Rod and Chris leave in their car into the darkness, Rose grins as she takes her final breath. Rod drives Chris away from the scene as Rose lies dead in the road as the movie comes to a close.